So it looks like the vast majority of all of us spend quite a bit of time on looking through data. And if your focus is visualization, we can rarely get to the data by just plugging it in, which means we have to spend quite a bit of time, right, massaging, understanding that data to make sure that we can visualize and make it super cool on the front end for the folks that are actually going to absorb and use that data. So why are we here today? What's this really about? This is about that great visualization doesn't just paint over messy data, right? So 50% is the amount of time that knowledge workers waste hunting for data, finding and correcting those errors, and searching and confirming those resources with data that they don't trust. And nothing ruins a good customer experience like bad data. So let's change that. So if we think about insurance in general, it's a little bit different than some of the other industries. We're a little less cutting edge. It's hard for me to say that, but we have a lot of work we can do to go ahead and get caught up to speed. And what we found, if any number is incorrect in any of the visualizations that we're doing, people don't trust what's in front of it, right? So if you're talking insurance and you've got 30, 40 pages worth of data that you're talking to folks when you have policies and things like that, and that data is inaccurate, or they find one number that they're like, that claim doesn't look very exact or correct, they dismiss everything else that we've put in front of them. So have you guys ever been solicited by the cable company, or let's say you have cable and the internet in your house today, and you get a phone call from them, and they're calling you, and they're gonna offer you some great prices, a good deal from speeds and services perspective and all of that, and you look through your own phone bill while you're on the phone line with them, and you're like, oh, actually I already have that? That's a bad data customer experience, right? That's the operations team and the sales team not really being together on the same page with what that data can really look like. I have notes up here, and I didn't realize it would be so small and confined in this little area here, so bear with me as I work through that. So before we really jump into data management in general, I want to talk just a little bit about the industry, because I think this is super important and a grounding experience for all of us to be on the same page as to why we did master data management. So what is the insurance industry? Well, it's healthcare, it's property and casualty, it's home and auto. I think we all have that already, right? Cyber is a really big new thing that we're offering at this point. D&O claims, as well as underwriting, all those sorts of good things. We're really in the business to help reduce and eliminate risk. And so when we talk about predictive analytics and what we spoke about earlier this morning, if you're in the business of doing that, you have to have that data right before we can actually do that for the individual clients and customers that we have. Another unfortunate reality of insurance, particularly for middle market to the small market, some of the big guys are already doing this, right? A lot of the ones that you probably see every day if you're looking at commercials and things have large data teams, but when you're talking that small to mid-market, insurance is really lagging in basically almost every other industry that we've seen at this point when it comes to data. So our pace, our ability to absorb change, and just understanding of data and what we can do outside of a paper environment or an Excel spreadsheet, much slower than high tech, much slower than the banking. So our problem hasn't changed for years in insurance. Basically, we have paper applications. We have a lot of one-on-one direct contact. We think that's what our customers want, and that's the customer experience they desire. But quite frankly, if you don't have that segmented and you're not looking at that in some different ways, some folks do like the one click, right? And I can just go check out my policy online. Other people want the hand holding, but until you know from the data what you want, it's hard to tell how you best service those clients. So with that, when we look at what insurance looks like today, the size and pace of technology investments are really reshaping insurance. So funding of software is basically, at the highest levels than we've seen since kind of the dot-com timeframe. And most of it is in big data and analytics in insurance at this point. So it's ripe for change, right? We have an increase in funding. We have a ton of inefficiencies. We have large consolidation movements in place. I think you guys probably see this in the headlines quite a bit. The P&E is really buying up a lot within insurance today, and that's because of the inefficiencies. That's the lack of the data standardization. That's the inability to potentially deliver in the ways that we need to be more efficient with people, process, data, as well as technology. So what does this mean? Well, from an internal factor perspective, this means, at least from the IMA standpoint, we have systems and data that lack standardization, which I'm sure almost everyone can relate to. We have a lot of complexity and scale issues because we have multiple vendors. We have many processes that are duplicative in an application submission and customer service processing. And we have a lack of sense of urgency, right? We don't have a burning platform today. There's nothing that's saying, you know what, insurance, you're gonna have to change, or you're gonna be disrupted and you're no longer gonna be there. Well, quite frankly, it's starting to happen just now. So when we look at the external factors, that long history of making money makes us fat and happy, right? We're comfortable where we're at. We're comfortable with our profits and our margins. And again, there's really no reason for us to think about why do we need to look at data in a different way. Our market forces, right, and disruptions. We have new channels entering every day. We have a lot of different data sources that are coming into play. We have a lot of different models at this point, right? It can be direct, indirect, as well as a ton of different players that think that they can do this better. And frankly, they're starting from scratch. If you're doing a startup and starting from scratch, you have a very different experience and opportunity from a data perspective than you do with someone like IMA, who's been around for 50 plus years. And we have all these consolidation of systems and things like that we're looking at to try to bring all that data into one holistic view. So I would say the lack of focus of completeness and accuracy, this is really on the internal side, right? So what customers truly see in the end is great data that's in front of them. But what does that mean from the back office perspective? It means we are spending that 40-50% of our time cleansing the data, ensuring it's accurate. Why does this data not match the system that's next door? We're swivel chairing right now. We got Salesforce. We swivel chair that into what we call our agency management systems, which is like an ERP. If you're in manufacturing, holds all the policies. So there's just a ton of inefficiencies, and then we're highly regulated on top of that. So you have to be able to ensure that what we gave you as a client matches exactly what is in our systems and the policy that was bound by our carriers, who are the ones that do the underwriting for the individual policies for us. So what does that really mean? I think we all know this, right? Bad data is costly. There's 3.1 trillion is the yearly cost of poor data quality. $1 trillion in the US alone in 2016. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our journey. Interesting, I think our latest slides didn't get updated, but that's okay. So the IMA journey, well, IMA is really continuing to go through our curve here today, the maturity curve, right? And I think everyone's probably familiar with this. You start with your basic reporting and analysis. You go into a monitoring and predictive phase, and then absolutely we all want prescriptive, right? We want what Eric talked about this morning. But a lot of us in the mid to smaller size companies have a harder time getting to that point because we have to do that data consolidation to start up front. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about master data management today and what we've done at IMA Financial and use master data management to really help set us on the right course and track. So before master data management, I can say we've had a few of these things already in place, right? Dashboarding. You can dashboard and visualize almost anything, right? And you can manually enter the information into the system if you need to, or into whatever you're looking to do from a visualization perspective. Again, doesn't mean much if it's not right, doesn't mean much if it wasn't organized, and it takes a ton of time if you aren't able to pull it direct from your sources with the accurate data in them. So we've had some of that. We had some client contacts. We have our basic accounting reports, the basic functionalities that we need to run our business. And benchmarking, particularly in insurance, is really important. It's important for us to be able to go to our clients and say, you are spending more in these areas from a premium perspective that we can do better, or you need more coverage, because quite frankly, in this day and age, cybersecurity, you might want to up those limits. So we have a little bit of that was already in place as well. And then we had pockets of some of these other things, right? The predictive, the prescriptive. We had pockets of the real-time analytics when we need it, the advanced business process analytics, things like that. But what's the saying that when you raise the water, all the boats raise at the same time? We're not quite there. And we want to make sure we're raising all those aspects of our different business units with MDM to really help support that journey. So what was our strategic approach at IMA to make some of this happen? Well, really, we said that this is a three-pronged approach. We have to have our data governance in place. We have to have our data quality management wrapped up, and then we have to have our master data management to support all of those things to be truly successful when we're looking at how to master our data. So I think it's very easy to get caught up in the visualization aspects, but again, if we don't have these three core pieces in place, really tough from that point of view to be able to do that and do that on an easy way and a scalable way, right? So our company's growing fairly quickly. We do it through acquisition as well as the organic growth, and for us to continue at the pace of the manual processes that we do today is going to inhibit us from being able to meet some of those growth targets if we don't get some of this data cleaned up. So what's our journey then? Well, this is pretty standard, right? We said we have 90 plus, it's actually closer to 120 systems and applications today. Keep in mind we have 700 folks that work with us, and it's just a ton of systems to wrap your arms around. Now we do have different business units, which would make sense that you're gonna have to have some different business applications to support. But that closer to 120 is a little bit scary when we look at the consolidation efforts and what you have to really do to have a single source of truth and to be able to truly understand your client from that end-to-end perspective. So with that, and decentralized systems and decentralized models, we are faced with quite a problem. When you think about the decentralization model, this is also interesting, right? You can go one of two ways. Again, newer startup companies, things like that, you can build from the ground up. You can look at the new, latest, greatest technologies, you can pick your 3 systems, you can implement that, and most likely your data is going to be flowing pretty consistently throughout all of those. If you have a decentralized model, which means you have different business units, you have different P&Ls, right, and everyone's responsible for their own P&L, they have a little more control over those systems and the data they want to put in the systems and the way they put the data in those systems, especially if you've grown through acquisition and a little more organically. And I think that companies out there make decisions, do you want to be decentralized versus centralized? But I will say, if you have that decentralized model, master data management is definitely the way to go in being able to get that data in one location, one place for that single source of truth. So we figured out where our data is, right, which is a feat in itself. You're looking through your data mapping, you have client name in one system, and maybe it's customer in the next, right, and how many contacts roll up to that client, all those sorts of things. But then we said, what are we going to do with that? Well, you really have to consolidate it, right? So we had to map our data and consolidate it to understand where can we take that from the next evolution and step. And then we had to master the data. And that's where we found out, even when we put all these things in a warehouse, right, and I think warehouse is pretty standard for folks today, without master data management, we really struggled with some of the concepts and the setup and the structures of the architecture to make this work really well as we started to create cubes and push data back out to the organization, as well as reports. So the master data management, as well as the single source of truth, is the area we want to focus a little bit more on today. So what were some of the current challenges we're facing? And I'm thinking this could be similar for a lot of you guys out here. When you go into an effort like this, it really challenges your strategic decisions and what you need to be ready for. We can't do all of this in a silo, right? So at IMA, we really realized that M&A has thrown a big wrench into what we do from a data perspective in really helping us bring our data and our systems together. So what we face here, multiple systems, I think everyone can relate to this. We have client data alone that lives in 4 main systems. This is a ton of information to wrangle. I don't know if you guys know anything about policies. Does everyone get the 50-page even for home and auto, right? And you have information on every single one of those pages. All of that is stored in these systems I'm talking about to that detailed level. And then we had issues with maybe our data integrity. When we talk about data integrity, if you have different business units storing data in different ways, everyone thinks that their own silo is the best way to store the data, to master that data, and to be able to represent that data. So even the truth internally from a business perspective, you know, anyone can represent data in a way that they'd like to be able to tell the story they want. And that was happening across all of our different business silos, which is really tough if you think about you have a client that has benefits, so healthcare, and they also have property and casualty, and we come together, and that data doesn't align when you're talking to the client. You don't look super smart about what's really going on within your business if you can't get the integrity there. So a lot of redundancies, a lot of incomplete information. We had a lot of wasted time, and we had a lot of mistakes. And then when you get to the no standardization, we grew through acquisition. We like to operate kind of fast and loose, right? One of the cultural aspects of IMA is that you get to make some of your own decisions. You get to own your own destiny. You have your own autonomy. But with that, and that lack of standardization, comes some major challenges when you're really trying to figure out how do I visualize what I want to present to my clients and internally. And then the fourth thing is decentralization, which we all have already talked about a little bit on this. So we had multiple data stores, multiple ways to capture the data, a bunch of different ways in how we represent it. So, you know, the downside, I think, would be the decentralized approach to something like this. The upside, we have the autonomy, we have the ownership, we have the ability to make some of the decisions that we want to on a day-to-day basis as an individual employee all the way up to the C-suite. So our goal would be that we want to better serve our clients. And if it takes you a long time to get your hands on the data, it takes you a long time because you have these internal inefficiencies, and if you're not able to exceed your client expectations, I mean, we're in a world where people expect it like this, right? I make a request, I expect to get something almost instantly back from you, and you don't have the ability to do that with your systems. It can be a tough spot to be in. So what have we done even a little bit outside of our master data management solution before we jump into that to really try to make this a better experience? Well, if you think about it, it starts with your executive buy-in, and we talked about this morning. Folks have to be on board. If you're in the executive team room and I have someone in operations that's saying, hey, Michelle, we're not going to go ahead and update those fields, I've already lost, right? Because you still need folks at the desk level, people that are entering the data every day to do some things consistently, even with a master data management system. So you got to start with that change management. You want to have that executive buy-in. And then you're going to get into the accountability and the incentives that go around that, right? So we realized we have the executive buy-in, and how do we get people to really want to do this within our company? And I think people that have BI organizations probably have done some of this already, but we have a data council that we established where we get together and we make decisions as a team with operations. And I'll be honest, some of those conversations are probably fairly boring for some of our business folks, but it is important that they are involved in those decisions that we're making because it impacts that entire company as we move forward. We also have done a few things around incentives. So if you don't tie this directly to your performance management, if you're talking about data quality, and I recommend you tie it to performance management, but if you don't, you better have some pretty good incentives as to why people want to do it, and have an ability to change the data and enter it differently every day. And then you want the right team structure, right? So you're going to want to make sure that you're working with the business. It's got to be a with the business. And whether that's SMEs, whether that's people at the desk level, you got to understand how the data is put in, you got to understand how you're storing that data, and then you got to understand how you'd like to master it. So master data management in general. So from a show of hands, who in this room has a master data management system today? Okay, just a couple. All right. So I will probably spend a little more time on a couple of the other slides on what this truly is before we jump into some of the results that we've seen. So to start off, master data management is really an approach, and we connect our records together in all of those different systems into this single golden record, right? So you have exact matches, which we'll get into a little bit. You have fuzzy matches. You're able to score, much like we talked about with predictive analytics, but this is for your data on the back end to get that single source of truth. And for us, this has been really powerful because to have a complete view of our customer from benefits, from property and casualty, from some of the risk aspects that we support means that we can truly help guide them from claims perspective and the right ways they need to go to, one, save money, and two, make sure they're well covered if there was some sort of disaster that happened. So how do we go about picking master data management for a tool as well as a part to be in our company? Well, one, we did decide, hey, you know what, we are going to be a little bit decentralized for now. Would love to go through an effort where we build up a new system and I can move all of my data from the warehouse into that and it's perfect and everyone's entering data in the right ways. The reality is with 100 plus systems and things like that, I don't live in that today. And that is not something the company wants to undertake at this point. So what can you do to make some of this better? Well, we said we definitely want to go with some sort of master data management tool. And we went through a scoring process, and I'm not sure How many folks, if you have a strong procurement arm in your organization, you may be very familiar with some of the scoring processes. If you don't have folks that are forcing you to look at things in this type of way, you may do it more on gut feel. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the prioritization framework and what we went through. When we looked at it from a company perspective, we said, there's really 5 key areas that we want to make sure master data management can do for us. The first is that it has the true functional and technical fit. So is it going to deliver the capabilities that I need within my organization? That one should be pretty easy, and I'd say all the vendors we looked across had this, right? If you're in business and you're even a little bit well-known, you're going to likely have this functional fit that's going to work for you. The second is really that ease of implementation and use. This is really important. We don't have a large professional services arm. We don't have a large IT organization. I have 20 folks that report to me. If we include data intelligence and BI, 25 total, right? So I don't have an army of people I can deploy to go ahead and help get this done. So we wanted it to be fairly simple, where we didn't need a ton of professional services and have to spend a lot of time and cost on the setup. The third thing was really, does it fit us, right? And that's both from the solution fit as well as a culture fit and desire to partner. So when we think about the solution fit and culture fit, this one feels a little more soft, right? It's kind of like the HR, hugs, like that. What does that really mean? But for us, we wanted a vendor that would provide and react with the same values that we have at IMA. We wanted someone that was flexible enough that they would work with us. We don't want people working to us, and we definitely don't want people working for us. So as we went through the selection process, and this is one of the reasons we chose Samarkey, one of the biggest reasons was they were able to flex with us. And that gets into kind of number 4, that future design fit. So our business is unique in which we operate in both a day 1 environment and a day 2 environment. So we have certain aspects of our business that is more of a startup perspective, right? And we have these little incubator startup-like things from an insurance perspective. That's day 1, right? Day 2 is you're really good at your core, you operate well, you make good decisions. You just take a long time to make those good decisions. And we have both of these, so there's a healthy push and pull in our company already. But I would say when I looked at number 4, 4A particularly, that enterprise solution fit, we needed a solution internally for IMA that would meet our data intelligence capabilities, which is a smaller portion. We also needed a solution for our startup company when we're talking big data that could absorb and flex and get big fast. And we wanted costing models that we could work with in both. And that was super important to us. The other was our vendor viability and stability. So when we went through this, there's a couple of young new guys out there, right? And there's some really big ones that are well known in this space. And quite frankly, a couple of the ones that was in the scoring with us are here today, which is interesting to see as well. And when we went through this, we really decided we wanted someone that's going to be in business. We've made some bets in the past on some of the newer up-and-coming type of systems out there that have not maintained, right? Which means you're stuck then with something that's no longer going to be maintained by the vendor, and we're moving to a new system, and that was something we absolutely didn't want to have to do. And then 5th and overall here is cost, right? So I think cost comes into play quite a bit, but what a scorecard does versus a gut feel at least allows you to lay all of this out from a non-emotional perspective, which was the most important for us, and from looking at it from a risk perspective. We're in the business of risk, we don't like risk. We want to make sure we're making the right decisions on our systems when we do this. So you'll see from a scoring perspective here, the golf score is actually the best score here. So the lower the better on this one. We started with 7 vendors. We got that down to 4, which are the 4 that you would see up here. And then we narrowed it to 2. And you can see the 2 is our vendor 1 and Samarkey, which are very close from that actual scoring perspective. So you're kind of like, well, what's next after that? That's when that human element, the human factor comes into play, and you really determine who you want to work with. I don't know if any of you guys have met some great sales guys. You're like, I definitely want that product. This is amazing, right? And then the implementation team comes in, and you're like, ooh, no, they don't work well with my team. The company's not going to absorb this. I have no idea what to do. We didn't want that to happen. I mean, sales guys are dynamic in general, which is fantastic. But you need to make sure that you're going to have that same type of support and have that same culture throughout. So I would say The few reasons we picked Smarky, which would be different for other people, would be we could start small and scale up to large. They had a very structured approach, and that human factor of feeling like they were going to work with us were some of the more key things that we went through. So what is MDM? Right, let's talk through what this can do for you. We currently have 4 systems that we have pulled into our warehouse that's now going through our master data management process. And first it starts with enrichment. Enrichment's pretty cool because when I think about this is when you don't have to necessarily insist to your desk level associates they have to do everything exactly the same way, right? Which can be extremely frustrating. So this is when you don't have to have things set up and say, when we enter suite for an address, it has to be SUITE. If it's STE, don't do it because I'm not going to be able to recognize that on our back end, right? So this enrichment process, you get that standardization, the same format. You get valid information, just like with the US Postal Service. You try to enter an invalid address and it pops up and says, nope, we're not going to move you to the next step. When you're doing packages, Amazon, same thing. They can't find it. They have that built in to say you're not going to be able to send that. So it does that validation process for us with our data as well. And then it'll do the actual corrections based on the rules that we set up. So this feels like one of those areas where we can actually also pull in data from third parties and have all of that happen and be enriched at the same time. The second reason I think that you would really do MDM and some of the real magic behind this is the match, right? Exact match is easy. It's great. My name's Michelle. That system says the name's Michelle, Michelle, bam, we're good to go based on the rules and criteria we set up. But the fuzzy match, or those matched based on that non-exact data, which is based on rules and the matching score that we'll talk about in a little more detail next, is what is the beauty of master data management that we've found some of the most value out of. I mean, I have records. We have 70 to 100 records that looks like the same client name, right? But without the fuzzy match, we cannot determine that that's truly the same client without doing a lot of work on the back end. And the third is to be able to merge and consolidate that, right? So you set up these cool rules, you understand basically what the factors are going to be to get the best data, and then you use that standard data and you move forward from there with that golden record. So when we talk about golden egg next door, I think of that as golden record if we're going to look at the back end and the data side of it. So match scoring, this is where you get into a little more of the details when we're talking about how do you get some of those fuzzy matches to happen, right? Well, we go through, and for us, we looked at a few different things. We said our client IDs, we'd really like those to match. That's our unique identifier, should be our unique identifier, though they're not as unique in different systems, right? They're unique per system. Probably go out there and say that. Then we said name and address. The bin on country and state, the bin is interesting from a processing perspective. If the bin doesn't match, it doesn't matter if the addresses match. If we don't have that country or state, we just disregard that and it processes much faster versus looking across from a global perspective. Website's important to us. That's another way that we can truly validate is that a true customer, but I'll be honest, we have some small mom and pop shops. We do oil and gas coverage, things like that. Not everyone has a website. And then fuzzy match with name and address, right? So you get this criteria. We sat down with our operations team, not in IT, but as a part of IT saying, hey, what are these key things that we're gonna need to do if we're gonna look across all 4 of these systems, and then we're gonna assign some scores to it. And Smarky does the assigning of scores for us, right? Based on this rules and criteria we set up as it goes through and starts to structure the data with us behind the scenes. So what does that look like? And this is sample data, but it looks like you have a source system, let's say you got 50,000 records, right? You can get that down to 28 golden records, which means some of that matching happened, and we were able to say, out of that 50,000, there's 28 that are truly clients across all of our systems. And then from there, you go into auto-confirmed golden records and not confirmed. The auto-confirmed is those 100% matches, right? Those ones that have the high scores, we have confidence in, we trust, depends on your rules and setup. We're okay with just moving forward with that as our golden record. But you're also gonna get fallout, right? And the fallout are those ones that aren't necessarily confirmed, and it's gonna need some manual checking and some manual look-through to make it happen and be successful. So that's where a data stewardship role comes into place. And this, we believe, really should sit in the business. It needs to be people to understand the data, they know the data, they get their customers, and that's what we would recommend. You have the business really be some of those data stewards and go back in and help clean up that data. Once you clean that data up, again, then you have your full set of golden records that you can then choose to do quite a bit of different things with. I would say the ultimate goal with master data management is if you have a spaghetti map, which is what I feel like my systems can look like. At times, it's a true spaghetti map. It would be able to reverse that, and in the middle is your data warehouse with your master data management, and this is really what stores all your masters, and it's pushing back to every one of those other data sources if you haven't decided to eliminate those data sources, so everyone is working from that single source of truth. So what does that look like or really mean for us in the insurance industry? And this is probably a little bit hard to see. This is all dummy data as well. But it means that we have reports now with high integrity. They are actionable and can help us both from a revenue growth and sales perspective, as well as reduce expenses internally and potentially externally for some of our clients. We have records that are clean. It means that this is truthful. People can come here, they pull their data, and they're like, you know what, I can go in front of my client and I have confidence that this is the data that I need to present. This is just a screenshot, right? But there's a lot of drill down capabilities. I'm sure you guys are going to see a ton of visualization today. We have a bunch of different ways you can represent this, but the real key behind this was to be able to say, within our industry divisions, what are our premiums, what are our policy counts, and who are we placing those policies with, which is on the right-hand side, which is our carriers. It's important for us to know what carriers we place our policies with, because we get different types of pricing based on the amount that you are placing within the right regulations and rules within the insurance industry. So here's a sample of one after we did some of our master data management cleanup. Again, we can go in, pull the reports. It's 2 seconds. People can trust the data, and they feel confident moving forward with it. This second one is really just more focused from a carrier perspective and gives you a little bit of idea on what we'd be able to do from that perspective. There were times, and this is pretty common in the insurance industry, where as a broker, you will go to a carrier and you will have to ask them at certain times for some of the data and say, hey, what does that look like from your side? And you're almost doing kind of this check and balance together. And now that we have the trust with the standards, we're able to really tell our story with our data, and we can have a seat at the table without having to ask for that from them. And we have a little bit more leverage and power because of that. And one of the many ways that we're really using it. So how do we really action some of this with the clients? Well, we've done some cool things now where we're able to produce reports where folks would manually gather in Excel, and it's a push of a button, right? And they have what we call a coverage map. So you can see all the coverages across a single client at one time, what they have, what they don't have, what the numbers are, from a premiums perspective are, and where they might have risk and exposure. And that's where the true power comes in, right? It's not that 50-page document that you guys all get sent from your insurance company. The power is to actually say, hey, you actually have this additional risk here, and let's talk about that and see what we can do to help you be fully covered. So what did we learn from this process? Well, we've learned, and I hit on this quite a bit already, that you have to have your leadership buy-in and get support early. And you have to work with the business. This cannot be an IT initiative. This cannot just be a business intelligence initiative. This is working together with the business to ensure that you're going to get the results you're looking for. We also found you have to have some questions and outcomes you desire. And what are you trying to solve for? I mean, MDM can solve for so many things. For us, it was really one single source of truth to start with, and then we can start to solve from there a little bit more. But understand what you're looking to solve for before you go out and purchase any sort of tool. And then we got very comfortable with this being agile. I'm sure a lot of you guys are already doing this with development in your companies today, but you have to be prepared to have an iterative process to get the data. You have to be prepared as you're sorting, you're organizing, you're cleansing, you're visualizing, to go through cycles and be comfortable with those cycles to get to kind of that perfect data that you're looking for. And then the other thing is really that clean data is a true investment, right? It's an investment of your time, it's internal time, and it's capital for every organization. So understand what the ROI will be, right? We've done some time studies. We understand how long it takes folks to play with messy data today, right? And we also understand what that looks like when they don't have to do all that back-end work and they're truly serving the client to say, you got risk exposure here, versus, I'm pretty sure page 4, that data is correct. So where are we planning on going from here, right? We want to be a data-driven organization. That's pretty big to say in insurance, maybe not so big if you're high-tech and things like that, but we want to start everything with our data and use our data to drive those actionable decisions and insights. We definitely want that single end view of the client, which we now have, and then we want to be able to enhance that with your third-party data sets. So once you get that, it makes it much easier as you do the integration aspects of that. Self-service reporting, I think this depends on the culture of your company, and it's probably a little surprising to see this up here, but up until a few years ago, we've really been one that's been more push all the output out in our internal customers or clients, employees like that. They don't have to do a lot of work for it. But as we're getting more introduction of millennials, as folks are getting more comfortable doing a lot of self-service on their phones and through some of the other mobile methods, we're realizing self-service from this perspective is going to work pretty well for our culture as well. Define your data steward roles and activities. This definition changes the more sophisticated you get. So again, be ready to be iterative as you go through that. Our goal would be to have total profitability across all our business lines. This sounds like something that should be pretty easy, but it also depends on, are you tracking people's time, right? And are you having them enter it like a consulting firm would versus not? And how do you really start to understand from your services side as well as your revenue side, how we bring that together to truly get the full picture of what that business line cost and revenue is for that profitability. New products, I mean, this is huge, right? I mean, especially in insurance, if you can come out and offer new products and services to sell, this is absolutely the space you want to be in. We are being disrupted already, right? You're either an innovator and you're on the front edge, and you're likely an innovator because you provided incredible superior customer value as well as had strong leadership, or there's the disruptor, right? Where you now, something that you held so dear and internally can be mass produced by anyone. And if you're not on the innovation side and you're not moving forward from that, you will be disrupted. And I'd say in insurance, small lines, right? So for our personal lines, all of us, we've seen it already. You have Esurance, things like that happening. Property and casualty, there's still a little more special sauce right now that's going on with that, especially for large clients. There's a reason why they would engage a broker. They don't want to deal with the carriers direct on talking through all those different actions and items. But this disruption is moving into that portion of our business as well. So you got to be at the forefront of that. And then end-to-end analytics, the balloon effect, right? So there's times, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this one as well, where you make a change, maybe in the sales process, thinking that that's the best thing for the client, and then the services back end has increased time or has to enter more data because of that change you made on the sales process. And what we want is that holistic view, end-to-end, client and internal view, to be able to best support moving forward. So with that, back to the slide we had a few slides ago, we're on a journey. I mean, this isn't a one and done, right? This is an everyday thing. Once you start this, we've had people in the organization say, hey, when does data end? When's Datapalooza going to be over? I'm like, we're just starting, right? This thing's going to be continuous. It's a part of our DNA. It needs to be a part of your behavior, mindset, culture. So we are still continuing to move up on the curve. I'd say we are getting fairly good with our customer journey analytics. We are really focused on our predictive real-time analytics across all business lines, not just the couple of silos that we had today. And we want to get to the Internet of Things, driven premiums, risk assessments, things like that, because the beauty of big data in insurance is if you have enough of it, back to the predictive analytics, you're going to be able to predict and maybe almost eliminate risks in some areas in the future with what you know about each individual. So MDM really supports this entire journey, and it can help you from that reporting perspective all the way through prescriptive. You have clean data, accurate data, you're comfortable with the truth of your data as you go out and you present that to clients and others. So with that, any questions from folks? Yes.
You spoke a couple of times about the data warehouse moving towards master data management. Can you explain a little bit of the nuance and difference between a warehouse versus master data management?
Yeah, sure. So our warehouse really is a place that's housing all the true data from the original sources, right? So we bring it in, we don't make any changes or transformations to it. It's what the original source of data was. When we start to integrate with that with MDM, it's taking the data from the warehouse and we're going through doing that matching and scoring. And technically you're changing your data a little bit to get to that single source of truth based on the matching rules that you've set up. And that is a new set of data. So that data doesn't necessarily match what's put into the warehouse when you start off. It is something we push back into the warehouse, but we want to preserve our original data at the same time. And then once you have that master data, you have the choice of, you could replace in the warehouse. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. You still want those original records. Of also pushing that back to some of your source applications, depending on those applications. Does that help? Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you push back on the business to kind of use the standards that you develop maybe message out of management, so we kind of update it in a more better way?
I'd say the business probably pushes back on us a little bit more than we push back on the business, but yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges of anything, right? Getting the quality of the data up to speed. And it's been a healthy push and pull between both BI and the business. I'm laughing looking at Megan here. Megan's one of my colleagues up front who helps deal with the business every day. But I will say it's a scary thing to embark on. So right now we're actually doing what we're calling Datapalooza, which is this cool event where we're incenting folks to go in and we've identified the fields that need to be updated or corrected or look differently outside of MDM. This is the way that we need you to put it in moving forward. And then we'll be able to have a cleaner data set to actually run through MDM even after that. And I'd say it's scary to them. One, they're like, this feels like more work. And so you have to do a lot of understanding of where they're coming from, and we have the explanations of it's not more work. You're supposed to be entering this data today, so if you haven't been, we're just going to get you to the area where we need you to be. If you've been entering it inaccurately, it's likely because we had some training issues and things like that, right? So we get them on board with thinking through that a little bit differently. And in the end, it's going to feel like more work at a desk level when you first start until it gets clean, and then it becomes part of that ingrained process. But it's a super fine balance. I can't in IT really come down and enforce some of those things. It's that work with, because they don't listen otherwise, right? So it's got to be meaningful to them. It's got to change the culture for them at the desk level. They've got to understand why this is important, and you have to be able to say, the data you enter in this field here relates to this report over here that we present to our client in our renewal process. And when this is wrong, your servicing account teams are spending 20% more time getting that done on the back end. And a lot of times, I don't think people don't want to do it, they just don't understand the correlation and why. Like, what's the why for me? And we've been going through explaining the why so that they're getting that correlation. They're saying, oh, I understand data is important. So we have 1 minute remaining. Any other last minute questions? Great, thanks you guys for attending, I appreciate it.